Seems very slow this morning, but that is the recording started. Lovely. Okay, so last week was, as you know, the kind of introductory version, what we're doing in the module, how it's going to work, all that kind of stuff, how the assessment is going to be done and what's in there. And this week we want to start a wee bit more on the actual materials. Now, as you already know, all of the materials are available online already in the order that we're doing them. So we're going to do them in this order. If you can't remember the order, it's in the syllabus. So what I'd like you to do really is read ahead. And I made the joke earlier that you've read every word. And I don't expect you to have read every word by now, but please at least read what we're going to do for next week so that you've got an idea of what we're doing. It's in your head, you've thought about it either from your own experience or from your own workplace or just general things that pop into your head when you do it. So have a look at what's happening next week. So this week we're starting on governance, and I'll make the point again that there are things that we won't cover in class as such. So you'll see on that governance section there lots and lots of pages. So of course the presentations are there, but there's links to lots of other information. Some of it we will look at, some of it we won't, but it's all there for a reason, and it will help both with understanding the course and the things that we're doing. But, and I'm acutely aware I'm speaking to students, they'll also help you pass the assessment. So make sure you've read all the other things, even if we haven't explicitly covered it in this meeting. So we want to start at the beginning with the G out of governance, risk and compliance. We want to start with governance. Oh, and my skills are getting better. See that? I said governance and it appeared on the screen immediately. I'm getting better this week. My computer's keeping up. So the first thing we want to do is talk about what we mean by governance. And many of you will, I know that some of you are already in organisations. Those of you that aren't might have some experience of your own organisation at any level, and you'll understand that there are lots of different layers in that organisation. You might have a line manager who has a section head, who has a team leader, who has a managing director, you know, whatever the organisational scheme is in your organisation. And all organisations have that. People at top, people in the middle, people down at the bottom. But that is a management structure. It's not governance. Governance is a very different thing. It's more than management. Governance is about looking at the organisation and viewing it holistically. So it's not, how am I going to order the paper clips this week? It's, where's the organisation going to be next month or next year? How am I going to keep my stakeholders happy? And that could be shareholders, it could be customers, it could be staff, it could be suppliers, it could be customers, it could be whatever is applicable to your organisation. And one of the important things to do for anyone who's in governance is to ensure that all of these processes are fair, that no one's disadvantaged. Everyone has their own agendas, but it's important to be fair to everyone in the organisation and make sure that everyone is treated properly. Now, not everyone's going to agree with what properly is, of course. So, Paul, one of the ways that we can address that issue is to make sure that we have procedures in place. This is how we are going to do X. Everyone knows what it is, everyone knows how that will work, and everyone can see that the outcome has been followed properly. So we need to be fair, we need to be transparent, and we need to have accountability. And it's important that that happens at all levels. And that can only happen if management and staff all buy into the governance aims of the organisation. And that can only happen if the people in governance positions actually take that seriously. Everything has to come from the top. And if, to take an example purely at random, if you have people in a governance position who say something like, yes, we are going to break the law, but only in a specific and limited way. What does that tell the rest of the people in the organisation? If the people in governance positions are willing to break the law, does that say to everyone else in the organisation, oh, right, well, if you can break the law in a specific and limited way, presumably I can as well. And it's going to be my choice as to which laws to break and by which amount. I don't know about you, but I think that's an incredibly poor way to run any sort of organisation, and it sets a terrible example. So all of these governance issues have to come from the top and must be bought into by everyone throughout the organisation. And I'm aware that some of my words are clunky, so I keep saying things like organisation and stakeholders and customers. And part of the issue that I have is that governance isn't just for business. Governance isn't just for governments or charities or whatever it happens to be. Governance is for all organizations. So I'll always try and say organization. But different types of organizations have different aims. If you're working for a company, their core aim is to make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. If the company doesn't make money, the company doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't mean the governance doesn't continue. It doesn't mean that you don't have good governance in the organization. And indeed, good governance might not always equate to making more money. One of Apple's core aims is to make the customer happy. And anybody who's ever bought an Apple product will know how expensive they are. But for some reason, Apple make lots and lots of money. And I can give you an example of why they do that. I bought an Apple product. It was an Apple TV. And it was probably over 3 years old, and it stopped working. And I did all the things that it said on the Apple website, and I did all the reset of the device, and I downloaded new software to try and make it talk and all this kind of stuff. Nothing worked. It was 3 years old, and most things these days, if it's 3 years old, the response from the organisation is, well, what do you expect? Having said that, I was going to be in Glasgow anyway. There's an Apple store in Glasgow. So I thought I'll make an appointment at their Genius Bar and see if I've missed something in what I was doing. I hadn't. I walked in, gave them the Apple TV, and they did all the same things that I'd done and didn't work. And I kind of shrugged my shoulders and went, okay, at least I didn't do anything wrong. And the guy said, hang on a minute. And he walked out from behind his wee Genius Bar and he walked over to the shelves and he grabbed a box with an Apple TV on it, brought it back over, opened the box, took out the Apple TV and gave me it. And I'm, what happens here? I said, well, I couldn't get it fixed. I don't know why I can't get it fixed. And none of the stuff's worked So that's not the kind of customer service that we want to give. So here, take this one, use this one instead. For a 3-year-old device that was well out of warranty, he just thought, for customer service, here, have a new one. Now, not surprisingly, I was incredibly impressed. Not surprisingly, it made me think much better about Apple. But let's think about that in terms of the organization. So this was a guy that worked behind the Genius Bar. And if you want to think in terms of organizations, it's quite low on the totem pole. He works on the shop floor. Now, he didn't go and see his manager. He didn't look up any advice notes. He didn't call anyone over. He didn't go on his wee radio headset that he had. He made the decision to say, Apple's core service is customer service. I can make this customer happy by doing this. I am going to do this. And he must have been very confident that he was able to do it, that he had the power to do it, that he wouldn't be chastised for doing it later. He just got on with it, leaving one very happy customer who has told this story multiple times to hundreds of people. I think they got their money's worth. But that doesn't happen by accident. That comes from the top to say, we want to keep the customers happy. Do what's required to keep the customer happy. But it certainly didn't make the company a profit. They lost money on it. But in the long term, perhaps that's the best aim. And given it for a long time, Apple was the most profitable company on the planet, I think you can say that company aim has made them a profit. So companies make a profit, but that isn't the be all and end all. Not all organizations want to make a profit. Public organizations don't, charities don't, clubs don't. But it doesn't mean they don't follow the same kinds of precepts and try to do the same sorts of things. Everyone has stakeholders. Everyone has someone who has an interest in the organization and what it does. Everyone looks beyond that if they're smart about it. So water companies have customers to whom they to whom they sell water. So their stakeholders are their shareholders who have a share in the company, and their customers to whom they sell water. Now, this is an England and Wales only thing, because in Scotland, the water companies are publicly owned. But I don't know if you've been noticing the news and all the water companies who have been pumping sewage directly into rivers, seas, and whatever. Now, they're not, the people that affects aren't directly or may not be directly stakeholders in that company. But you tell me whether you think better or worse of these water companies knowing what you know. So that company hasn't been particularly smart about it. They're not looking beyond their own core interests and thinking, well, what does this do for the organization as a whole? And it might be, in fact, that by doing this, they incur greater regulation, that they are fined, that they have, whatever the punishment might be. So governance is important, whether it's a business, charity, public organization, whatever. So I'll probably talk about organizations, but in your head, think that this could be a different thing. It could be a government. So a government, not surprisingly, the root of the word comes from the same place, provides governance. It provides strategy and direction. But you don't see Liz Truss wandering about distributing money at the Dole office. Nor do you see her organising how that's done. That goes to management. And then it's implemented by civil servants. So there is a clear delineation. The governance role is to decide what the organisation's aims are, what its direction is, and what should happen. Management's role is to implement those strategies, those aims, those goals. And to do that, they have to organise how that will be done and then get their staff to implement it. So that's a fairly solid pyramid there. Sometimes it gets a wee bit trickier, and I know that some people in this call will be familiar with the next slide. It used to be that the health service and social services were separate. So health services were provided by the health board. Social services, care at home, Meals on Wheels, were provided by local councils. That caused issues. So, for example, a patient might stay in a hospital for a long time because there is no support at home. There's no medical need for them to be in hospital, but they couldn't be discharged because there was no one at home to help them. The social care part wasn't properly implemented. That was a two-way street. There were people who were being looked after by social care who actually had quite acute medical needs, but they couldn't be serviced, or at least couldn't be serviced locally, or they might have to travel to another health board. There were issues. So they were brought together. The idea being that health boards and councils would work together, and the name of that is something called an integrated joint board. So the IJB provides a strategy and direction for medical and social issues. That makes a wee bit more of an issue in terms of organisation. So where you have a government, nice, easy pyramid. Government, give it to civil service management, give it to civil servants to do it. Integrated joint boards, on the other hand, have two other organisations within them. So the IJB set the strategy and direction for how discharges should work, what services should be in place for them when they are discharged, all that kind of stuff. But the organisation for that is then devolved to two other organisations, councils and health boards. And they have to organise how those services are provided and also provide the joint working to make that work. And that's done by the civil servants implementing that, whether it be a nurse, a doctor, a care home worker, a social worker, or whatever. And if you have a business, we have the same sort of triangle, but instead of it being a government or an integrated joint board, we just call it a board. Instead of civil service management or councils and health boards, we have management. But we still have this same pyramid. A direction is set. The way to implement that direction is then decided on and organised, and that's then implemented. So governance and management are two different things. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I don't really understand the difference between the first triangle and the last one. The last one is for business.
Yes.
And the first one is like governance in general.
So we have a board or a government, but they both provide strategy and direction. It just depends what kind of organisation they are. And that's why I'm saying I talk about different types of organisation. So you'll see that the stuff on the right here, this strategy, direction, organisation and implementation all stay the same. The question is how that's organised. A business might have a board of directors who have management, who then have operations. This integrated joint board might have two organisations underneath it, a council and a health board, and then implemented by civil servants. And a government might have the government setting the directions, civil service organising it, and then civil servants implementing it. The point I'm trying to make is this stuff on the right here, the strategy, direction, organisation and implementation stays the same, but it might be called a different thing. So when you're working in different places, you might have to try and figure out what the structure is. But the governance structures, strategy, direction, organisation, implementation, all stay the same. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
One question, please.
Yep.
Is it possible for us to have people on the management cadre being part of the board?
There are places that happens. So some companies, for example, might have representatives from the workforce on their board. There are plenty of organizations that have union representatives as part of that, so that they can provide that input to the board, however you want to call it, so that they can provide that governance and strategy input from different areas of the organization, in order to ensure that when the strategy and direction is set, that it has a better chance of working because you've had input from all areas of the organization. So yes, that can happen. And it's up to the organization itself whether they want that to happen, and if so, how that should be organized. So there is no, you must do this, you must not do that. There are, however, clear principles of good governance. And in fact, one of the things we're going to talk about later is how an organization decided to set up its own governance and how it chose to do that. But governance and management are different.
Sometimes the difference between governance and management is not as clear as it should be. COBIT 5 clarifies this by recognizing that each serves a different purpose with different responsibilities, and that each requires different types of activities and different supporting organizational structures. In short, COBIT 5 uses the mnemonics EDM for governance and PBRM for management. EDM stands for Evaluate, Direct and Monitor, whilst PBRM stands for Plan, Build, Run and Monitor. Governance, or EDM, is about ensuring that stakeholder needs are evaluated to identify and agree on objectives that must be achieved, directed through prioritization and decision making, and monitored for performance and compliance against objectives. Management, or PBRM, is about ensuring that all activities undertaken and monitored are in alignment with the direction set by the governance function. COBIT 5 includes a process reference model, which divides the governance and management processes of enterprise IT into the two main areas above, EDM and PBRM, which identifies a series of 37 processes across governance and management. COBIT 5 recognizes that organizations are different in size, structure, and complexity, which is why organizations can organize their processes as they see fit, provided, of course, that all necessary governance and management objectives are covered. As you get to know COBIT 5 more, it will become clear how to use the concept of the enabler. Remember Principle 4, to provide the interactions between the governance and management structures and processes to provide an efficient and effective governance system.
It helps if I turn my microphone on. So what we're talking about is different approaches to the same thing. Governance, deciding what the aims of the organization are, management ensuring that those aims are completed. And you saw that there was COBIT reference there. And you'll also have noticed that COBIT is one of the things that we'll be talking about later. So we've got frameworks for governance, risk and compliance. COBIT and ITIL are IT specific ones, but they're still helpful in understanding it. But in your OneNote, you have links to something called OCEG, OCEG. And that's the organisation that they claim to have invented governance, risk and compliance. I would prefer to say that they formalised it. So they have something called the Red Book, which gives a structure to these sorts of things. So I said earlier that it's up to the organisation to decide on its structures, but that's a wee bit of a catch-22 if you don't know what the structure should be in the first place. So things like the GRC capability model, things like COBIT, things like ITIL, all help in providing those structures, which you can then choose from when implementing in your own organisation. So we've got this idea that organisations have governance, and part of that governance is deciding what the organisation is going to do. One of the ways that they do that is with a very maligned approach, a mission statement. And you'll have come across loads of these, I'm sure. Anyone recognise the mission statement, dream, believe, achieve, for example? And I'm looking squarely at the students who are actually on campus, because it's on pretty much every wall at UWS, because that's the mission statement of UWS. Dream what you want to do, believe that you can do it, and then go out and achieve it. And that's the kind of pithy 3-word version of the next paragraph, because the next paragraph is also a mission statement. Our purpose is to change lives, transform communities, and encourage enterprise through outstanding, distinctive, and progressive higher education, and so on. So I've got a question for you. Which of those is a better mission statement?
Second one. The second one.
Second one? Why?
Because he let me see how to spell in English.
If you want to come
The-
back in that
because-
again later, once you've thought about it, that's fine.
Because the description is more detailed and more.
So it gives more detail, in essence. Okay.
And more impressive.
Impressive is an
more
interesting word to use in terms of a mission statement. Should mission statements be impressive? Suppose if you're an organisation trying to impress people, then maybe your mission statement should be impressive as well. Nicola, were you coming in there?
I think initially I was going to agree around it's more descriptive, the second point, which allows you then to think more about what they are trying to achieve and how they're trying to achieve it. She's speaking. Did you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I heard you, Nicola, and then someone came in after that, and I wasn't sure if it was someone saying or if it was just a wee. I think it was just a wee bit of buzz in the background. And yeah, so that's why actually sometimes there will be these multiple things. So dream, believe, achieve on its own. Well, I mean, it's good for a pen, but how do people working in the organisation take that forward? The more expanded version is better for those either who work in the organisation or who attend the organisation. This is what we are trying to do. We are trying to make a personalised learning experience. We are trying to make sure that you're work ready. Not 10 minutes ago, I spoke about the assessment and I said, well, if you're in a professional situation, you're not getting asked a word count, and that's part of being work ready. So, you know, hello UWS, I'm following your mission statement. Can I get a rise, please? So mission statements can be tricky. To help make every brand more inspiring and the world more intelligent. I mean, that's a pretty impressive mission statement, I have to say, until you realise it belongs to Avery. And if you don't know Avery, they make sticky labels to put on folders. I'm not sure that's making the world more intelligent to know what's in your folder, but you know. Our mission is to operate the best specialty retail business in America, regardless of the product we sell. And you'll see there's an ellipsis in there because this is a massive document. And I say document, but it's not a statement, it's a document. To say that our mission exists independent of the products we sell is to demean the importance and the distinction of being booksellers. So this is a company called Barnes & Noble. So are they proud of being booksellers, or do they want to be a wider retail organisation? Because they seem to have changed their minds from the start of the mission statement to the end. And that confuses everyone as well. It confuses the shareholders, it confuses the workers, and it confuses the people coming in. Are they going to be sold a book, or are they going to be sold a t-shirt? MGM Resorts International is a leader in entertainment and hospitality. A diverse collection of extraordinary people, distinctive brands, and best-in-class destinations. That's not a mission statement. That's just a statement. That's just aren't we wonderful? So that's why mission statements get a bad reputation, because some people just think, oh, it's just a bit of advertising, a bit of puff. But some people use them really well. Here's a mission statement for you. A world without Alzheimer's disease. Well, that's pretty clear what you're coming into work to do every day. Better health and well-being for all Australians now and for future generations. Again, pretty clear. We're going to make people better, and that's not just about the here and now, that's about making sure that it works from now on. So perhaps we make a change now, and that helps successive generations too. So just for a wee bit of fun, does anyone recognise any of these mission statements, or do you want to guess where they come from? What about the first one? We can be relied upon to collaboratively negotiate crowdsourced infrastructures to meet the needs of an ever-changing marketplace. And do you want to make a guess? Or does anyone recognise it?
From university.
Say that again, sorry?
Is it
Sorry?
from UWS? Like
From UWS? Any other guesses? Or the second one, we are committed to authoritatively customize scalable deliverables to reach new levels of customer service. The faces I'm seeing look puzzled. Margaret?
This is probably not the best time to mention recent reading, but I'd say they're probably non-existent, i.e. made up.
Yeah, they're from something called the
but
Mission
I
Statement.
admit to
Generator.
cheating a little bit. I had read previously.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. Everybody in this meeting should have known this. I shouldn't be able to fool any of you, because mission statements have become sometimes have such a bad reputation that John Hallworth has created a mission statement generator, taking a whole pile of buzzwords, chucking them together and creating mission statements. And I have to say, some of them, bless you, Nicola, some of them work well. I was talking about customer service earlier. That middle one could be an Apple one. The third one, for initiating infrastructures, I could see BT using that as a mission statement quite easily. But there is a serious purpose to this. Mission statements give clarity on what we are doing, and that's what governance is. You want people in the organisation to have clarity about what they're doing. Because once you have clarity about what you're doing, it becomes easier to do it. And that harks back to what I was saying earlier. Everything should be transparent. It shouldn't suddenly be, oh, you do something and there was an obscure rule that nobody told you about, held in a filing cabinet in subsection C behind the door saying beware of the leopard. Everyone should know about all these things. They should be available. So that when organisations deal with anyone, we have this accountability, fairness, transparency thing going on. So organisations, certainly larger organisations. Now, there may be a problem for smaller organisations. Whilst they might want to follow general governance principles, and certainly should, the time and expense of having a corporate governance framework for your local window cleaners probably isn't the best idea. Not the best use of time, but for any reasonable sized organisation, you will want a framework in place that actually says all of the things that you're going to do, how things are going to work, how you're going to work with other people, who has responsibility for doing what you get for that, how, when, as there always are, how when there are disputes, how you fix them. We talked about an IGB earlier, which is a health board and a council. Well, what happens when there's a dispute there? The health board want to discharge a patient. The social services say they have no more resources to look after them. How do you sort that? How does that work? And it helps when you have these things to have proper procedures in place. And I spoke last week about having the procedures and having things recorded. That makes it so much easier when there is a dispute and when you do have to figure out what happens next. So putting these information flows in place, someone decides to do something that then goes somewhere else. Or there's an aim to sell 10,000 widgets in the next month, but we only sell 5,000. Well, what's the information flow to say, yeah, we haven't completed our aim? Who knows it? Who gets to know about that? And for those people doing the IT-based MSc, this will quite often come under your remit. Not making 10,000 widgets, but putting in place information flows that say, well, we haven't made 5,000 widgets, let's fire off an email to this person, or let's set a RAG indicator. And if you know what a RAG indicator is, don't worry, we'll come to that, back to that later. Let's set a RAG indicator to Amber to say, okay, our KPIs, and I'm deliberately throwing in lots of TLAs just now, just to keep you on your toes. So a KPI is a key performance indicator, which an organisation might have to decide whether it's doing what it should be doing. A TLA is a 3-letter acronym. All of these things pop up all the time. So don't be discouraged when you see them. But particularly for you IT guys who might have to set up these information flows to have a dashboard that sets an indicator to Amber to say, oh, we might want to watch out for something here. Now, it might be it's a really clear reason. We did not make 10,000 widgets because our widget machine broke down. And we didn't get it fixed in time to make 10,000 widgets. And there's two parts to that. Well, that is really clear and it's really obvious, and we understand why we didn't make 10,000 widgets. But maybe we want to drill into that a wee bit more. And by the way, for those of you from other organizations, I'm deliberately using the most non-judgmental example I can think of, but this might apply to anything. This might apply to any KPI. Okay, we didn't do 10,000 widgets because the machine broke down, we only did 5,000. Oh, good, we understand what went wrong. Bully for us. But it's also about fixing it. And someone might reasonably ask, someone in a governance position, for example, might reasonably ask, if we were making 10,000 widgets and we only made 5,000 in a month, that implies that that machine was down for 2 weeks. Why wasn't it fixed within a day, an hour, a minute? What is a reasonable expectation in terms of these organizational goals? And they will be different. And again, for the IT people, we talk about things like uptime for the computer networks. So if you say something like, oh, we've got a 99% uptime for our computer network, 99% sounds fantastic. But somebody in governance might look at that and go, 99%. Well, in rough terms, that means just under 4 days a week, we won't have an IT system. 4 days a year, we won't have an IT system. Because 99% of 365 days means we get 3.65 days where we don't have IT. Is that okay for that organization? So one of the things about governance is understanding the aims of the organization, deciding what a reasonable way that that organization should run should be, getting information on whether those aims have been reached, and asking reasonable questions to understand why they have or haven't, and if they haven't, how that's going to be fixed. And that then comes back to this triangle. The board asked the management, why was the widget machine down for a fortnight? Oh, the widget machine was made in Korea and it took 2 weeks for the part to arrive to get it fixed. Okay. And again, that's an explanation, but is it a corporate strategy? If we have got a machine that can only be fixed for 2 weeks and we lose half our profits, shouldn't we be changing how we make our widgets? And if we can't change our widgets, maybe we should have some spare parts handy, or maybe we should contract another company to come out and be able to fix our machine within a week, a day, an hour. And again, that's going to be up to the governance aims of the organization. And if I go back to the IT example, that's a very good example of how these things might be written into contracts. If your computer goes down, at home, it's annoying. You might have to take it in to some wee company and get it fixed, and it might take a week, which is, as I say, annoying, but it's your home computer. You might not be able to watch the iPlayer for a week. You'll live. If your company computer goes down for a week, you have an issue. You can't issue invoices. You can't do any accounts. You can't do whatever. The question then becomes, how important to you is that computer? And if you're not into computers, substitute anything that you want. How important is it for you to have enough beds, enough staff? You have to decide what resources you're going to put towards a problem. So if your company computer goes down, you can, for example, decide, yeah, I'll get a new computer and I'll get it sent and we'll put all our stuff on and we'll get back on whenever. Most organisations wouldn't see that as reasonable. So some organisations might have another computer sitting there. So if one computer goes down, you switch to the other one, you switch to a backup computer. But of course, having two computers is quite expensive. So you might want to outsource that. So all of the people who might have a computer breaking down will outsource it to a computer fixing company. And you'll say to them, if my computer breaks, will you come in and fix it? And they say yes, and this is how much it will cost. But they'll give you different numbers depending on whether you want it fixed within a day, within half a day, within an hour. And you can get contracts that say, yes, we will be there within an hour and we will fix whatever is wrong. But not surprisingly, they all cost money. And these choices have to be made by the organisation. That has to be built into governance. And there will always be an issue between available resources and the money that you put towards them. And there will also be an issue for different parts. The IT department want money to spend on getting their computers up and going. The accounts department want money to spend on getting new accounts people to get the accounts done. The admin people want new admin staff or new equipment. All of these competing issues will have to be reconciled, and you will never please everybody. But part of governance is doing that and understanding what the issues are and deciding where the importance lies, which is why the people that are in charge, which we'll call a board, but remembering that there can be anything, there can be a committee, a council, a board, a government, whatever. The people who do this, the people who decide on these policies, the people who arbitrate between these competing aims, the people who decide where resources are going, should actually have some knowledge. Not of everything, of course they can't. But if you're running an organisation, you probably want people on your board that know about some of the organisational issues, whether that's people, so people with experience of HR, people with IT experience, people with finance experience. From the question earlier, people who have experience in actually delivering whatever it is that your organisation delivers. You need skills. Because if the people who are in charge of the organisation don't have those skills, how are they going to set the aims? How are they going to balance those aims? How are they going to decide what the organisation should be doing? When things go wrong, how do they have the knowledge to question management to understand what went wrong and how it might be fixed? Do they even have the knowledge to ask a reasonable question? Or are they just going in saying, well, what's wrong? So it's important for the governance of an organisation to be independent. So we talked earlier about having worker representation. Many organisations don't like that because they feel that that endangers the independence of the board, because you're making a decision based not on everything within the organisation, but just on the small part that you represent. People on the board have to be rigorous. You can't busk it. You can't walk in and go, oh, do we have any papers? Oh, there's only 500 pages. No, I didn't read any of them. Can you just give me a quick idea of what went on? They have to actually work at this and understand what's going on. And they have to be competent. And that's less common than you might think. Margaret, I can see you smirking. Nicola too. Competence is a much underrated ability. The number of people that are actually competent is fewer than you would hope, and certainly fewer than you would like. And let me give you an example. For the UK, the board of the UK is the UK government at Westminster. And people take responsibility for different parts of the organisation. Not long ago, we had a Foreign Secretary for the UK whose name was Dominic Raab. Dominic Raab was responsible for foreign relations. Dominic Raab did not appear to know that the UK is an island.
That we want a bespoke arrangement on goods which recognises the peculiar, frankly, geographic economic entity that is the United Kingdom. We are, and I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this, but if you look at the UK and you look at how we trade in goods, we're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing. And that's one of the reasons why, and there's been a lot of controversy about this.
Not only did he not know that we're an island and that things have to come across water, he admitted it in a speech. Competence and Dominic Raab did not seem to be in the same room, or certainly on that day. So it would be quite nice if board members, and again, use your own nomenclature as you see fit, it would be quite nice if board members were independent. They had a range of skills that they could bring to the board, organisational skills, skills from other organisations, experience that they might have had doing different things. And they should have enough skills so that they're able to challenge. If someone says, okay, we are going to reprofile our capital expenditure because we are at the limit of what we can do, and we are going to not build this building this year, we're going to build it next year. Fine, okay. And it would be quite nice if the people on the board could ask some relevant questions. Will we have the capacity next year when we didn't have it this year? What effect will that have on the services that we provide? Will there be a knock-on effect on any of the organisation's services that we're intending to use that? Because presumably we're building another building for a reason. What will be the knock-on effect? Oh, and by the way, we were borrowing money to build that. Will it now cost us more next year because the chances are that interest rates will go up next year compared to this year? All of these are relevant questions, but if you don't know about interest rates, or you don't know about the organisation, or you don't know about management capacity, or you don't know about, well, you tell me. If you don't know about these things, if people on the board don't understand these things, how can they even ask sensible questions about changes to the management of the organisation? So they must have skills to be able to challenge the management. You should be able to say, why aren't you building that building? Not in those words, specifically not in those words, because there's no help at all just to go in and be combative. But to challenge, to criticise in its original sense of the word, to understand what's going on and to say, well, is this the right way to do it? Wouldn't we be better? And if not, why not? So you hope that people have some skills that they can bring to that and to bring to that conversation. You would certainly hope that board members have high ethical standards, because, and doesn't it feel weird that I have to say because? Yeah, you want people to be quite ethical, because to have to explain that, oh no, we don't want ethics. But oddly, it feels as if, certainly in our public discourse, the idea of ethics has been lost altogether. It would be nice if people had a high ethical standard. understood the responsibilities that they had and took seriously their responsibility in delivering them. Some organizations, and certainly larger organizations, don't take those for granted and actually codify. So they have standards that they impose upon their staff. Sometimes they're called codes of conduct. So we have different rules that we put upon people. So in a previous life, I was the IT director of a company, and that company had a code of conduct. And I'll just give you one example because we're actually going to talk about codes of conduct later on. But a very simple thing. If I go to see a supplier as the IT manager, and the supplier want to sell me some equipment, if as part of that sales talk, I don't go to their offices in Slough, but instead go to a Scotland-England rugby match at Twickenham with corporate hospitality beforehand, and they put me up in a meal, put me up in a hotel before taking me on a tour of their facilities, followed by another meal at the Dorchester. Might I be slightly swayed in my choice? And actually, you could argue either way. If I'm doing my job properly, I shouldn't be. And I should certainly tell people that I have had all of that. So the code of conduct for the organisation that I worked for at that point actually set a figure. And it said, if you get something that's less than a tenner, so I was forever inundated with, because organisations knew this, you would get notepads and pens and mugs. I had more mugs than I knew what to do with. And that was just my staff. No, I didn't say that. I need to cut that out of the recording. If I got sent those things, I didn't need to declare them. But they sent them on the basis that if I had a mug sitting on my desk that said, buy network communications stuff, then that'll be in my head and I'll do it. And certainly if they took me to a rugby match and gave me a meal and all the rest of the stuff, that would certainly sway me. So there were codes of conduct where if I did receive those, I had to declare them. And in fact, if it reached a certain amount, I wasn't allowed to accept them at all. Because you don't want that kind of conflict of interest. You don't want to be swayed. And you certainly wouldn't want to have someone on the board who belonged to that company and who tried to sway the board towards giving a contract to the company that they also represented in a different role. So you've got all of these things for people on the board, all of these things for people setting the governance rules. And I'll give you an example, an actual example. So this was an advertisement for a non-executive director. Now, for those that aren't aware, an executive director has a role in the company. They're actually there, they're taking decisions, they are on the ground all the time. A non-executive does not take an active role in the organisation, but instead comes in to perform the governance role. There's more to it than that, but for now that will do. And there's the sort of things that were in this advertisement. Provide leadership. Yeah, of course, yeah. Governance is leadership. This is what the organisation should be doing. This is what we're trying to, this is what our aims are. This is what we're trying to get to. But you have to do that within what the organisation has, within the limits of the money that you have and the staff that you have and the buildings that you have and the plant that you have. So you have to be prudent, you have to understand risks, and you have to assess those and manage them. You have to uphold the company standards. So again, we've been talking about this before. Not surprisingly, you want to uphold the standards, and we should be talking to our stakeholders and our communities This is for Highlands and Islands Airport. So our communities, like for example, the town that's beside an airport, they might not be a direct stakeholder, but if your choice as part of the board is to decide to run night flights, I think your local communities will be quite interested in that, and you might get some pushback. So you have to understand the framework, both for direct stakeholders and more widely. As we've been saying all along, you have to set the aims. So you have to set the strategic aims for that organisation. And in this particular case, it's within a national performance framework. So the Scottish Government have a national performance framework, and I'm well aware that some of you in this meeting are well aware of that framework because you have to do your stuff as part of that framework. More specifically for this particular one, there is, as well as the national framework, there's a framework for these airports, the Highlands and Islands Airports Limited Framework Document. So you would have to be familiar with that and what its aims were. You'd have to attend meetings and contribute, and that's what I was talking about earlier. You have to actually know things to be able to contribute. You have to prepare for them. So you don't just wander in going, oh, do we have papers for this? I haven't looked at them. You should actually be reading them and understanding them and thinking about them beforehand. And in fact, if there are things in there that you don't understand, you should be speaking to people in the organisation before to get them explained before you get into the board meeting. You might have to go to other meetings with other organisations, with other governments, with whoever. Support the organisation. Prepare the corporate plans, approve accounts, monitor the financial position, work with other organisations, and the usual one, any other tasks. So all of these things come into it. But as I said earlier, you set the aims, but you don't get involved in the delivery. That's for management to do. And of course, if you set those aims, you do still have to have a clear understanding of the capacity of your organisation. There's no point in wandering in to an organisation and saying, oh yes, I know that you produce 10,000 widgets a month. From now on, our corporate aim is to produce 1 million widgets a month. Go do it. Be gone, my minions, and let me know when you have finished. How do you do something like that? You don't, is the short answer. And any aim that's set up to do that, not taking into account the current state of the organisation, simply shows that the person setting the target hasn't understood the organisation. So goals have to be achievable, because if they're not, all you do is ensure that your staff are demotivated before they even start. If you start at 10,000 widgets a month and are told to do 1 million widgets a month, you know that that's not going to happen. If someone walks in and says, we do 10,000, can we do 11,000? That might be a way of doing that. Let me think about it. Let me see if we can shift some work patterns around. Let me see if we can get the materials we need to make those 11,000 widgets. It's a possibility. On the other hand, 3 orders of magnitude is not a possibility. So people just walk out going, they don't know what they're doing, so I'll not bother either. So policies should be set in clear understanding of what the organisation already does and what it can do. But once those policies have been set, get out of the way and let the people on the ground get on with it. Don't ignore them. Things need to be monitored. If you are going to that 10 to 11,000 widgets, you might want a monitoring. What have you done? Oh, well, we've changed the shift pattern to run 24 hours, and as a consequence of that, we've hired more staff and blah, 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 blah. Great. You're doing something, we can see the targets being met, and we know that this is going to happen. So there has to be reporting. You have to have information coming through. Which is why, as part of the governance, you should set clear performance targets, or KPIs, key performance indicators. Our key performance indicator is by, what we're in September, by March next year, we will be producing 11,000 rather than 10,000 widgets. So there's a couple of things in there. It says what you're wanting to do, produce more widgets, but it also says we recognize this doesn't happen tomorrow. It's a 6-month aim. So you might have different things with different timescales. So you will set aims. They will have specific aims, specific times, who's involved, who is going to make sure that this happens, who's responsible for it. And that will then be reported back on a timescale that's reasonable. There's no point getting daily reports on something that's supposed to happen in 6 months' time. But you might want to get monthly or bi-monthly reports to see what's happening in terms of reaching that aim. But again, that's down to the organisation and how it wants to pursue its aims. And one of the things that you might have an issue with is the risks. We might not be able to hire enough staff with the correct skills. Might be a risk for that aim. We might have to hire staff and then train them. We might not be able to source enough raw materials. We might run out of space to hold our widgets. We might, it could be anything. But that's part of this whole process, trying to figure out what the risks are. Governance, risk, and compliance. Trying to figure out what the risks are, enumerating them, deciding how important those risks are and how likely they are to come true. So it's not just performance, it's risk. Be aware that we could have a problem. And we also might want to have some controls. So we've been talking about, or I've been talking about in the main, creating new aims. But the aims might already be there, and you might want to know if something happens. We didn't reach our 10,000 widgets, we only reached 9,000 widgets. How soon do you need to know about that? Now, there's no compliance issue. It's governance, risk, and compliance. There's no compliance issue with not reaching 9,000 widgets. But as an organisation, if you haven't reached your 10,000, you might want to know about it. So there's this notion of control. We haven't made 10,000 widgets. We haven't answered the phone within 30 seconds. We haven't admitted someone within 30 minutes. We haven't, well, again, your organisation will have your aims. There's an opportunity when we introduce this to set controls, to say, this is how we would like our organisation to work. And then we can report back on those controls to say, yeah, we've reached them, we've not reached them, and if we haven't, why? And that is a lot of work. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't, which is why I said earlier that there should be governance structures in place for all organisations, but the extent of them will depend on the size of the organisation. And certainly for medium to large organisations, you have to have these things in place. For the reasons that you can see on the screen there. One of the things on your materials talks about how these things are enforced and often how they are not enforced. So there are plenty of organisations that will do these things because it's the right thing to do. But there are some organisations who don't have these structures in place. And I say some organisations because many of them no longer exist. And if you don't have good corporate governance, that is what can happen. Some of you may remember Enron. Enron were an energy company in America who manipulated the markets to produce huge profits from themselves I'm sure that would never happen now, but you know, back in America 20 years ago, it did. Arthur Andersen were one of the big four accounting companies who didn't follow proper corporate governance. And in fact, they sold consultancy to Enron, whilst at the same time auditing Enron's accounts. So they had a competing aim. One side of the company was selling them things, and one side was saying, yes, it's okay to buy this stuff. So when Enron went bust, so did Arthur Andersen, because nobody could trust them to audit their companies anymore. And there are many more, and there are links there if you want to look at them. Some countries brought in regulations for that, and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act is particularly important for financial transactions. Some countries, naming no names, took the approach that they probably went to Eton with the same sort of people that were taking these decisions, and they were good chaps really, and probably the idea of putting in legislation was not really worth it, because, you know, we'll see them down the Garrick and we can just give them a stiff talking to. So some countries legislation, some countries, yeah, we'd kind of like you to do this, but, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you which is which. And once again, I've talked a lot longer than I expected to, but do you have any questions on all of that stuff? Okay, got the wrong screen up. I wasn't looking at the chat. Yep, I'll definitely try to finish by 1 today. Okay, if there's no questions, so I said what we'd be doing is a kind of lecture tutorial thing. But there's no questions now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording.